So I know last night took a long time, but I don't regret it. Let's see. I have some place to go soon, but yeah, I became really frustrated last night. It's fine. I mean, I'm passionate about things, I guess. Uh, what I was gonna say is also my internet is really fucked up. I'm getting about a 40% packet loss, and uh, I had the guy came out like right away. It was pretty nice. Like I use Spectrum, I guess, and they came out. Oh my god. Hold on, because ZSH's history doesn't actually work. I mean, it does work, but like when you want it to say something like, "Oh, I want whatever million things in there," it always disappears like after a week. It doesn't do what you tell it to. And people are like, "Oh no, you just do all." Yeah, I've tried everything, dude. I've tried fucking everything. It does not do it what it says it does. I've looked at the code. It does not do it. Um, so I should send in a patch. Yeah, I know, right? Anyway, um, I hate it when people say, "Did you read it?" Yes, I read the documentation. I read the code. I read all the bugs. I read everything. You dumb fuck. So now I can't actually get to my. Oh, I can get to there. So let's see. Is this thing now down? Is my internet down? No, my internet's up. So this is okay. Oh, here. There's a delay. See, and I've got a very long retry window on this one, and so eventually um, it goes through when normally it would drop. So I've configured that network card to do that. Whereas this one, this machine I haven't. So it drops. So you can see 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It dropped 9. Dropped 12. Dropped 15, 14. Yeah, dropped 20. So that's about 20%. Yeah, there it is, 21%. So yeah, guy came out, repaired it. Didn't really repair anything. Uh, I'm getting my own DOCSIS modem. See if I can get the diagnostic information off of that. And yeah, so stupid. Anyway, I don't have a lot of time, so let me just go through this. Oh yeah, the shirt I had yesterday. I forget what it was. It's just some cloud company, and this one I don't even know. It just says build local on it. That's all it says. I don't know if that's a company or what. No, I have no idea. Maybe it's Snowflake. Maybe it's this company. There's a couple shirts I got where I have no idea who these companies are. See, even like a whatever 40% packet drop at 500 megabit is not bad. It just means that streaming and a bunch of other things doesn't work. So this was really frustrating. I still am not able to replicate the damn bug. Um, but anyway, let's just pretend that I don't care about that and go through the entire thing. Somebody just hit me up. Oh, here it is. I sent a gift to my mother, and I was like, "Did you receive my package?" I'll show you what the gift is. It's fun. I don't know why I keep doing this. I mean, this is more personable. It makes me hopefully a little bit less boring when I do these. Oh gosh, that's right. I took this trip out. Oh, on public transit. I took a sort of a day trip out by public transit, and I was at a Daiso in Monterey Park, I think is the proper name, and I got these, and then I sent them to my mother. It was fun. And I just asked her, "Hey, did you get the gift?" And she says, "Oh yes, I forgot to thank you." Oh, um, yeah, it's kind of funny. Anyway, okay, so I'm using this. I think that a lot of my problems would just go away if I just switched to something like GNOME. Just a mainstream software. So I should probably just consider abandoning all hope and become more mainstream. Not do the cause anymore. Yeah, so I don't know what company this is, so let's just start this. I should be able to finish it. Yeah, by 7:20. It's just 6:43 right now. All right. What's my timing? 5 minutes. Okay. Oh, did I already hit it? That'd be so frustrating. After I got off last night, I spent like another hour trying to get that fucking bug to replicate. I failed. It'd be so funny if there it is. Oh my god. And then I watched the video to try to see if there was some kind, try to replicate what I did in the video to see if I can fucking find it for the life of me. Anyway, what's the time? 6 minutes? All right. Linux has microcomputer predecessors pre-1996. If you find any mistakes, I built something for you to correct me. This also has a script. This is a general talk that I've done this a few times when it's way off to the side. And tomorrow I'm going to do this in an actual room, but I don't know if there's going to be an audience. Don't care if there will. So here's some of the players for a 20th Century Journey, if you haven't met them yet. Let's warm up the time machine. We all use Linux, even if we don't know it. When you see a machine reboot at a grocery store, it's like, oh hey, there's that penguin again. Linux has arguably become the most ubiquitous operating system. How did that happen? The story usually given is an undergrad posted about his hobby project, and a bunch of people helped out. Wait, a college kid with a hobby project started a computer revolution by posting? That's absurd. What about all these other things? They're only the Unix-ish ones. Oberon by Pascal's Nicholas Wirth is from 1987, and there were many other ones that didn't make it on the deck. So I use the word ones twice here, which is bad grammar. So let me fix that. See, whenever I do this, I always stop, and I'm like, oh, wait a second. And the problem is I'm going to be doing this when I do the actual talk. I'll be like, oh shit, I want to change that one small word. That's what comedians do, right? And that's why their jokes are like, the other day I was at my sister's place, and like, yeah, the other day is actually like 7 years ago when you wrote the joke. What was I doing? Number 9. Yes. But here's a various commercial ones. Some of these are complete systems, others are kernels. The lines are between the first and last release. Linus wasn't shouting out from the wilderness. There was a vibrant PC Unix ecosystem that predated him. Products such as Xenix and Coherent were hot stuff at one time, but are now the works of Ozymandias. Look at the timeline, Emighty and Despair. I need to be smooth with this. That's because this guy, Genghis Khan, the Unix War. There's only one commercial Unix without hardware attached to it, still around, Zinnios UnixWare 7 Definitive 2018, which last release was actually 2017, and that's it. It's deader than dial-up. But Mr. McKenzie, there's more to the story. What about the BSD lawsuit? Well, what about it? The first BSD was released in 1978, but for our story, we'll only use 2 names. We'll only need 2 names. How about that? I fixed this one recently. But for our story, we'll only need 2 names. Husband and wife team, Bill and Lynn Gillette. Why didn't that win the Unix war? This is usually given, but it's not persuasive. BSD is much older, and in an interview with Bill Gillette in 1994, he says he started working on 386 BSD in 1986, even though only Net 1 and Net 2 were released in that interim. Also, there were 5 lawsuits that held up Linux in quarter over a decade. Did that affect its development? Okay, let's assume there was a 2-year hold on BSD. Then we should go over to, say, Usenet, see a fair amount of silence during that period. But in fact, we do not. It was lively and vibrant. There is no evidence of any chilling effect. The highlighted post is an update on the lawsuit amidst a bunch of articles talking about progress and bugs, mapping out the velocity of Usenet articles and BSD groups to look for changes correlated with the court case's activities showed nothing of interest. However, there were a number of articles across Usenet with titles like Linux or 3.6 BSD, where people compare them. Many include minutiae such as specific hardware, but none talk about the lawsuit. Also, there's a first mover advantage theory where people write history from the first successful implementation and forget about everything that came before. There were digital currencies before Bitcoin, MP3 players before iPod, and social media before Facebook. Linux's timing was favorable, but there's more to success than that. So we have to reject the hypothesis that BSD was held back because there's no contemporaneous evidence. Besides, NetBSD went out in April of 1993 and FreeBSD in June, and they already had things like networking. The first installable Linux was MCC Interim distribution in February 1992. It's really not that far apart. Tell me how wrong I am, go to the URL and denounce me at your leisure. Regardless, Linux has become a few orders of magnitude more prevalent than BSD and killed commercial Unix. How? Actually, I want to remove that. No, it's funny. I'll keep it in. Here's two possibilities, the Great Man Theory and the social history. The second is harder. Let's try the first. It looks easy. It says some glorious thing happened, but you can't do it because you don't have the right genes. Unfortunately, that isn't useful unless you enjoy sulking about things you consider flops. But you're all rock stars, right? So what about the second? Using syllogisms. Mere mortals did this. We are mere mortals. Therefore, we can do this, but only if we know how. The first is much shorter speech, a Carlyle-style hero worship about how great men should rule and others should revere them. A gushing mystical biopic. However, we've got a much harder job. And to do it, we must have defendable and falsifiable hypotheses. But first, here's some more jargon. Perhaps Linux was the second act of the personal computer revolution, personal software and personal hardware. If the center will not hold, things fall apart, and anarchy is loose upon the world, we might as well make it productive and get some nice software out of it. Maybe if free Unix needed a pool of hackers to build it on cheap computers with a robust communication network and avoid bad actors taking advantage of their generosity. Maybe. There's also the maybe nots, that falsifiable thing. Number one, Unix was thought to be really complicated. Actually, it was seen as quite elegant and simple. The Unix source license was $200,000 in the 80s, so of course it was complicated and magical. But that was marketing. Even 3.6 BSD, 20 years into Unix, was done by the Jolitzes, the husband and wife team, just two people. Number two, community-based programs were thought impossible. There's an organization called Share who came up with a Share operating system in the late 1950s, which was community developed. Share was eventually structured closer to a buyer's cooperative. To see how it worked around the birth of Unix, let's go to Computer World in 1968. During the past 4 months, Share has been working with IBM to define changes needed by users. When the company responded, 12 of the 13 requests had been turned down. Well, IBM, look at what happens when you ignore the users. Oh yeah, Share was Los Angeles-based, so LA pride. Speaking of things that happened over 40 years ago, this is ancient history. Although Unix started in 1969, the first paper went 5 years later. Here, first paper went out. I want to have went out. It sounds better. Paper went out 5 years. Here's 4 principles extracted from it that will be useful for our journey. Leverage don't invent. Doing beats planning. Needs not desires use early, use often. Although each one may have its flaws, together they form a cohesion, even a synergy, if you will. Unix was designed for classic computers that died out, called mini computers. A dead class of computers. Called mini computers. They were about an order of magnitude or two cheaper than mainframes and also less capable. Well, at first. People wanted to solve their little tasks on cheaper machines because that's all they had access to. Roughly every decade or a new lower-priced computer class forms based on a new programming platform, network, and interface, resulting in new usage and a new industry. That's called Bell's Law, and it's from 1972. As mini computers came onto the market and became more powerful, Unix was there to leverage them to service people's needs. These new machines provided new context for new software. These needs are only meant as examples. The point is the velocity of computer progress was faster than people's needs. Apparently, computer performance increased as a square of the cost, and transistors per chip doubled every 18 months. Those are called Gauss's law and Moore's law. Together, it meant the industry eventually ate itself through a multi-decade-long digestion. However, when new things come in, the people who get there don't get there easy. It's okay though, some of us are crazy and prefer it. AT&T was under many legal restrictions, and because of that, Unix was initially distributed as if it came out of the back of an unmarked white van. The mantra was part of the presentation deck for early Unix, saying you're on your own. Think of the adventure, the excitement. But who are you catering to with such a message? Where will their behavior guide things? It's not about welcoming everybody doing anything. With any of these efforts, you have to ask yourself who you're bringing to the door and what kind of behavior you're expecting. That's what separates a library from a soccer field. For example, Linux, September 1992. Minix is good for education, coherent for simpler home use, Linux for hacking, and 36BSD for people who want the real McCoy, or a year earlier. You also need to be somewhat of a hacker to set it up, so for those hoping for an alternative to Minix 386, please ignore me. It is currently meant for hackers interested in operating systems and 386s with access to Minix. Maintaining focus is about intentionally, not incidentally, but actually intentionally choosing what to ignore. You have to be a clear legal signal amongst our noisy world. Because you had to know what you were doing, Unix was initially introduced through engineering and technical people and not through the conventional decision makers. But it worked, and by the 80s, Unix was mainstream. The problems... Actually, I said the problem here. I did see the problems up there. I don't know why. Page 9. Problems. As both the consumer and producers of Unix multiplied, the suppliers differentiated themselves by succumbing to the trappings of usual competitive markets by enclosing the commons, trying to take ownership of groups and commonly held things by setting up barriers, thus locking them in and growing their base by trying to be special, which led to fragmentation. Unix had infected everything from the workstation to the mainframe. Unisys, one of the mainframe makers, had an article in a September 1987 issue of Computer World predicting a tripling in Unix sales in a single year. The problem with the infighting goes back to that chart with various blobs about computer classes. The threat is almost always coming from below. In this case, it was Microsoft and microcomputers, and not Nixdorf Cynix on an NS32000 versus Clix on an Intergraph Interpro. In 1985, Microsoft argued that their Xenix Unix, which had an install base of 100,000, would be a multi-user version of DOS. In 1987, they said they didn't see it competing with their plans for OS/2, which at that time was seen as a successor to Windows 1.0. Things changed. I had something right here. Hold on. I want to say LOL. Yeah. And so it's... They said they didn't see it competing with the plans for OS/2, which at the time was seen as a successor to Windows 1.0. LOL. Things changed specifically that December with the introduction of Windows 2.0 and later with Windows for Workgroups and NT. That was a real threat. Anyway, Xenix required 12 360K floppies, which was seen as bonkers. A 32GB micro SD card is about 93,000 floppies, 100 meters stacked end to end. That's like a 2.5 minute walk. All that storage is now in the size of your thumbnail and costs as much as a taco on the west side. Anyway, software distribution used to suck. Speaking of Microsoft, that punch tape is how they distributed BASIC for the Altair in the 1970s. It took about 20 minutes to load, and it wasn't stored on disk because the Altair didn't have one. Just keep the computer on if you want to use the software. The lower right is called a type-in program. Software was distributed like this as multiple pages of hexadecimal. No, really, this is MLX format. They published listening like this every month for years. You typed it in. There was no electronic reader. There's some basic code on the first page, and it's not easy either. This QR code is the game running on an emulator in your browser. You can scan it and just tap it on your phone. No typing required. Anyone want to scan it and give it a try? You could only use the software you had access to. There was also software user groups, which were convenient for the 1 in 20 people who lived near them. But for most of us, software meant retail, mail order, or copying flopping from a friend. The bottom two methods had consumer overhead. For dial-up, you usually had to pay an expensive phone bill, and for internet, you probably didn't have it. 2400 BPS access to Genie in 1989, for instance, was $42 an hour, and that's how long it takes to get a megabyte over 2400 BPS. This means most people were only exposed to the top 3 groups, and it was difficult for smaller developers and non-commercial ones to get their software to the masses. Paraphrasing Marketing High Technology, Bo Davidow, 1986. It's not a product without a distribution channel, or in Linux's case, a distribution. The technology may have the potential to address the needs of many, but without specialist redistributors to put it on the hands of those customers, it will not succeed. Productions are sold through distribution, not to distribution. Let's jump forward to the why Linux question here for a bit while this diagram is up. Linux had high accessibility of the installed media. March 1993, Unix World lists FTP repos, BBS numbers, and companies that could make mail-order Linux from. Later, you could find Linux at coffee shops, libraries, and attached to magazines at the grocery store. Filling up a CD with a Linux distro and cribbing some how-tos was cheap content for a magazine who just wanted to get an issue out. But let's go back to the problems. Depending on the distribution channel, updates had different logistic complexities, especially when considering updates from outsiders. For instance, if you wanted to update the RioTel Lotus 123 and have your changes appear on the shelf of Circuit City, you'd probably have to do it yourself and get arrested. It would have been fun though. Once there were online networks with the storage and communication necessary to unlock multiplayer mode for the software development game, a new way of writing software was created. Yaki Benkler described this as commons-based peer production in his book, The Wealth of Networks. Let's go to Linux 1991. I've enjoyed doing it, and somebody might enjoy looking at it and even modifying it for their own needs. It's still small enough to understand and modify, and I'm looking forward to... it's still small enough to understand. That's all you need to do. Let's go to page 12. I could even cut him off even more. It's still small enough to understand, and I'm looking forward to any comments you might have. I'd like to hear from you so I can add your software to the system. You just do that. Adding Minix things to Linux is fine, but how do contributions and updates work? Unless you can answer these questions clearly, progress will be slow, infrequent, and inefficient. Everyone has to agree on the same terms and feel welcome, otherwise they don't come around here no more. Joe GNU made a Rooseveltian list of 4 software freedoms to define free software, but it's not just license. It's organization plus license. For our purposes, we're going to talk about horizontaling software development. That's what's labeled adoptive on the chart. Essentially, how easy is it for modifications to become integrated and in the same distribution channel and other people to become a distributor or to share your product. You need a legal structure and organizational structure that affords this. An open shop that permits anyone to come in. Eric Raymond spoke to this in The Cathedral and the Bazaar. In the Cathedral model, which is tall, source code is available, but development is restricted to an exclusive group. Contrast this with the Bazaar model, which is flat, in which the code is developed over the internet in view of the public. The vertical lines here, from permissive to restrictive, is a general continuum. Public domain is seen as too permissive in the eyes of a GNU because you can relicense and reprivatize things. I've also read that copyleft and GPL are different from each other, but I never went to law school. If you zoom in, you'll see non-computer things. Let's go over a few. Bottom right is facts. People ought to be really hesitant to modify facts and their public domain. Above, you have most religions. Anyone can preach the good word and start a congregation, but at least in principle, the texts are sacred. As we go up, we get jokes, recipes, human language, and at the top is folklore, which changes readily. As you move to the left of public domain, you get Wikipedia, which anyone can edit. On the restrictive side, adoptive side is social media. Anyone can contribute to platforms, retain a bunch of rights. Classical commercial software is down at the hesitant and restrictive camp. Actually, I end up wanting to say classical, and I don't think I need that. I can just say commercial software. The pink stuff is all Linux related. Minix is down next to freeware and GCC in the hesitant category, below the pool label Unix is. Except for social media and Wikipedia, all of this is early 1980s, not 2024 accurate. Speaking of the past, let's go to the introduction of Minix. In 1986, commons-based peer production wasn't feasible. People didn't have the internet in their pockets like you do. Because of this prohibitive logistics around software distribution, updates, and especially customer-initiated, Minix could only be a cathedral. Also, it was a product of Pinterest Hall, who wanted to sell textbooks and instructional material for Tannenbaum. So here's the relevant parts of the announcement. It's not public domain. However, the publisher does not object to people making copies for friends. This is SneakerNet. If you want to sell it, which is the 2 categories above SneakerNet, retail and mail order, you need permission. In his book, you will find a postcard that you can use to order the software. There's our mail order again, and he says he doesn't want to have to copy a bunch of floppies, as in do SneakerNet. Now, Minix was adjacent to GCC. What's up with that? GNU was also a cathedral. Here's an example of early GNU bulletins in 1987. We can see listing out different distribution channels, as in they solicited funds to pay programmers to write more software, like a software engineering firm. They played a second role as a provider of copyleft and eventually software under the GPL, which came out a few years later. Every bulletin had a growing list of software by others that you could order. Now, I want to get that. I think the GPL was 89. But that was from memory at the time that I did that. Oh my God. I want historicals. 89. Yeah, February 89. Fantastic. This is exactly 2 years later. Oh, no, 2 years and a month. You could get NetTube BSD and then BSD 4.4 Lite from them until 1995 because Linux came from below and GNU got disrupted like everyone else. Then GNU started backing a Linux distribution, which ended up breaking up with them, called Debian. As far as distributed free software goes, there's precedents such as this one from 1986 trying to be a repository for public domain software, from smaller productions such as code published in, say, Dr. Dobbs' journal. Some assembly programs ran over 40 pages long in that publication that you, of course, were expected to type in yourself. So people were looking for a more reasonable solution that didn't cost much, but not all the pieces were there yet. All of these things require labor, coordination, and resources. How we instrument those lets some things get done better faster. Means how we instrument those means some things get down. Yeah, I stumbled over that one. How we instrument those means some things get done better faster. Ideas are bizarre even when their implementation are cathedrals. For instance, there were many graphical desktop computers even though each one was a proprietary restrictive project. The superstructure of desktop computing operated in the adaptive space. Pretend we have a concept of a free operating system. We may not get all the parts right the first time, but the Platonic ideals exist. Well, kind of. It's as much a contemporaneous invention as anything else, as a pale true thought suspended in our live stream. We can go back. Oh, let's go back to here. Oh, I hit the bug. The bug is hit. Fantastic. Okay, cool. So, I have no idea how I hit it. Everything's derailed. We're canceling everything. I need to figure out what's going on here. So, oh no, that was just a focus problem. Okay, never mind. Ideas are bizarre even when implementations are cathedral. For instance, there were many graphical desktop computers, even though each one was a proprietary restricted project. The superstructure of desktop computers operated in the adaptive space. Pretend we have a concept of free operating system. We may not get all the parts right, but the first time, but there's Platonic ideal exists. Well, kind of. It's as much a contemporaneous invention as anything else, as a pale true thought suspended in our live stream. We can go back to Vannevar Bush's Mimics article, as we may think, in the Atlantic from 1945 to see the spirit of what we now call many things. Unlike products, Platonic ideals are collective projects owned by nobody. They are permissive and adaptive and not static abstractions divorced from human influence. Their ideas manifested from context. The map is not the territory. In our industry, we're tasked with creating both through pure thought stuff. What a responsibility. We better organize. This is about the complexities of building software and not about electing people. You may have heard that commercial software began with Bill Gates' open letter to computer hobbyists in 1976, where he denounced Sneakernet distribution of Altair Basic because he didn't get paid for each of the copies. That's not really where commercial software began. In the mid-1950s, software was in-house, coupled with hardware, or contract-based, as you can see in 1959 ad for a programmer from Punch Card Data Processing. But the version of commercial software that had products for computer you already owned existed since at least 1960. Computer you already owned. Should it be owned? 42. No. I mean, owned would resolve that. Nah, it doesn't. Oh, just leave it there. No, really, this is another falsifiable thing. Bruce Perrin's chapter in open source, Stephen Levine and hackers, they allude to a Garden of Eden in a past from which we have fallen where all software was free. Really? Well, no. Here, 1966 claiming commercial software was a $100 million industry. And then in 1969, 11 companies worth at least $100 million each got together to form a trade group. Hardware vendors bundled together software to lock in their customers like Microsoft did with Internet Explorer. It was as free as Windows is on a retail laptop. People were trying to DRM and patent software back in the 1960s. attemptees, and more than one succeeded. Maybe there was some idyllic Valhalla in the bubble known as MIT Artificial Intelligence Lab, but the real world was up to the same tricks they are now. Anyway, debundling happened in 1968 and 1969, vendor by vendor, and Unix arose from its primordial soup and is one of the oldest non-mainframe software that is still recognizable today. Let me hyphenate that to make that more readable. As Windows is on a retail laptop, that's correct. Non-mainframe hyphen. Recognizable because the family tree looks like a European dynasty. The Unix timeline covers a few years in the 1980s. Zooming in, you'd see Minix, MIT Trix, SunOS, Mach, Xenix from the House of Free Software, AT&T, or the King of Microsoft. I'm still not a lawyer, but this gets really confusing. Not only did the source and binary have different terms, but sometimes only certain organizations had access to them. For instance, if you're an educational institution with a pre-existing AT&T license, then you had access to BSD, I think. So a version might have had multiple parents, each with a different team. Term sheet, it's a legal Habsburg. I want to check that one, actually. I believe that's true. That's why, a few slides ago, there was a puddle labeled Unixes. Even the Unix term itself is a confusing mess. Raise your hand if you think it's still copyrighted by AT&T. No. 31 years ago, AT&T's USL Corp sold the copyright to Novell, which then donated to the Open Group, which is now a standards organization. Some Linuxes have gone through the process, so Linux is now a Unix. Really, you're just finding it out right now? This stuff is absurd. We need something with clean documented history, a clear license, and easy answers to all of these problems. So Linux and eventually all modern open source projects have this solved. All development is open, the history is well archived, and OSI approved licenses solve the family tree problems. The structure that's now ubiquitous is one of Linux's major contributions. Also, let's talk about the internal politics of building software. In the Abstract Penguin slide, we covered the outside aspirational curve where things take decades and opinions are strong and many. Things like paradigmatic ways of doing open source software development took 20 years to dominate because the longevity and application of the more abstract solutions is on the same time frame as their implementation. But within that exists lower-level Maslowian motivations, and in keeping things there, make them more actionable. Let's say your network card is sending out packets. We can say this bug is known, agreed upon, and demonstrable. So although it may not be easy, the labor path is traversable. Now a new network card comes out. You need it to work in Linux. This is a need. You can demonstrate and come to an agreement on what that would look like. Now pretend you want that network card to do something it wasn't designed to do. That's harder to demonstrate and agree upon. To get that actionable, you need to put it in desired lower curve so that a development cycle can encompass it. It's worth noting the Tannenbaum-Torvalds debate from 1992 to illustrate this. Tannenbaum chastised Torvalds' approach because it wasn't a microkernel and Linux was exclusive to 386. Really, Linux was in these lower curves, and Tannenbaum was trying to pull it up to the higher curves where things move far slower. That's where all the hot research always is, people trying to make these higher level concepts more real. Can I put this in viewer mode to get more space? GNU heard as a microkernel approach. Stallman claimed in the early 2000s that's why it was taking so long and wasn't very stable. The higher level curves are unlikely to succeed except as superstructures of lower level functions in the same way that our asymmetric approach to Platonic ideals happens on the back of incrementally more appropriate implementations, which is why you can snake a line from the 1950s IBM share organization to GitHub. Though through that process of clarifying the aspirations, they get moved to the concrete because they become material needs and bug problems. The clarity of the present sits on both the triumph and the wreckage of the past. For instance, the Mach 3 microkernel led to Pink, Next Step, Workplace OS, Taligent, and eventually XNU, which is part monolithic and now is the basis for Mac OS. To get there, that curve burned over a decade through multiple companies and billions of dollars. But as a cynic, I tend to know the cost of everything and the value of nothing. Oh, speaking of costs. The prices. Here's both an article and an advertisement from May of 1990. Sun says they have a cheap $6,700 computer. Here's a PC at about 1/10 the cost, which is fine if it can do the same things. Historically, that answer had been no, but referring back to the chart with the needs and computing classes, this dynamic was likely to change soon, especially since the 386 had technical features which made running Unix-style operating systems more practical. Let's also talk about the price of Linux. Zero, right? Well, no. You were paying hourly for dial-up internet access, but between 1989 and 1994, that price dropped 90% and the speed quadrupled, which meant what cost you $100 will now only be $250. You could also get CDs or floppies, which were initially priced like low-end commercial Unix. SLS was $100, Nascent was $90, but the GPO allowed anyone to distribute it, so these prices collapsed quickly. But that's not the only kind of price there is. There's also the price of time. This is a conceptual and not a quantitative graph. Essentially, Windows is the easiest to get up and running, but let's say you want to do something like convert a bunch of files, sort the contents, pick a field, extract the values, do some operations on them. These things get hard quickly. Early on in BSD were a pain to set up, but they had networking before Linux. They were more professional. However, there were fewer people working on them who tended to be more experienced, so they were busier and expensive. Linux was mostly a student, which were famously cheap. Linux was also heavily hobbyist-oriented, which usually meant the systems were more hackable than other Unixes. They presumed while other Unixes presumed you had something to do. Oh, period. While, yeah, let's just do that one, so I don't run over myself now. Page 20. So, page 20. More hackable, period. The other Unixes presumed you had something important to do. The more difficult and time-consuming it is for a customer to use an information system, the less likely it is that they will use that information system. That's Calvin Moore's 1959. As the complexity of the problems become more intractable, the approachability of the lower levels and the internals of the system become increasingly important because people tend to use the most convenient method in the least exacting mode available and stop as soon as minimally acceptable results are found. That's a principle of least effort. It is also how hackers work. Also how hacking works. Hackers tend to build worlds where everything is possible, but nothing of interest is easy. Alan Perlis called this a Turing tar pit in 1982. Pulling yourself out of the tar pit pulling yourself out of it from a capable. Yeah, that's a good way of doing it. That's what you want to do. Pulling yourself out of it from a capable, usable system requires some engine to push it forward. Commons-based pure production can also be seen as prosumer, or producer and consumer put together. It's used in social media where you are consuming other consumers' productions. Here our engine is problem-solution integration, which keeps us in the bugs needs development cycle. With the Bazaar method of development, the changes reflect back quickly, which means that new users have fewer problems with their different hardware, so that for other people with, say, your network card, it would just work. But where do you find the people to do that? Well, you build armies, of course. Large networks are important. Their utility scales quickly with the size of the network because the combination of groups grow faster than the utility of the groups that join. That's Reed's law. For example, we start using Linux. You have a network, what is this thing? I need to get going. Card that doesn't work. You now join the subgroup of people, becoming a we that needs this card to work. This only becomes an engine if we have the right people to complete the cycle we talked about. The first level here are enthusiast developers and bug fixers, followed by the curious and hobbyists, and then the business needs, and finally people that can't have things fail. Hobbyists, then a comma. Arguably, one of the failings of the early BSDs is that they were too lopsided on the upper steps and couldn't get the virtual cycle moving with enough velocity. Analyzing email addresses of about 2.5 million Usenet posts over a 2-year period, there were almost always more commercial emails for BSD and more educational ones for Linux. So even though their general trend was ascending the staircase, Linux had more torque from the bottom groups. I call this Linux's revolutionary theory. The hacker vanguard formed a coalition with the personal computer proletariat, and the business-oriented bourgeoisie becomes interested, and finally prohibitive assiduous aristocracy is able to use it. There's one last type of price, expertise. You could assign a utility function roughly as the capabilities divided by the effort required. Sometimes both capabilities and efforts increase over time. Blender, for instance, is highly capable software, but also takes a lot of expertise to use effectively. Many mobile and web apps, on the other hand, actually remove power user features over time to make the product require less effort, while also making it less capable. Still others, Framework, for example, get Fairbook's second system smell, a new version that's harder to use and leads to inferior results, thus being an inversion of the graph and decreasing the utility of the product. Let's talk about the multiple arrows. To get a larger user base, you need a diversity of capabilities requiring a diversity of efforts. Linux was able to achieve this by outsourcing the actual packaging of the OS through distributions. This is another insight about the Bazaar software model. Since the entire structure is more flat and structural organization barriers are mostly removed, as markets naturally subdivide and form, they can be quickly and readily addressed. Because we're doing social hearsay, let's use critical theory. Mark Hughes' idea of de-radicalization. The dominant structures, say markets, subsume the novel. However, because in Bazaars people can self-organize, they beat it to the punch and move faster than a market force, which is why open source decoupled structures are more dynamic and swift-footed than commercial approaches. Here is a chart from Innovative innovator's dilemma, describing different strategies that can be taken as technologies get better. You can push up market to higher end consumers, or you can stay with your existing customers. However, because the horizontal development of Linux and the existence of distributors run by multiple organizations, he was able to do multiple strategies at once. Not only these, but any other ones have been left out of the graph. The packets. A few slides ago, we saw how Linux has a horizontalist, bizarre approach to software internally. Let's look at the implications of this externally. This chart is taken from Andy. I have to leave in 5 minutes. Only Paranoid survive, describing how the industry moved from one-stop shop verticals to horizontal structures. If we put this in the aspirational space, this can be viewed as part of the same decoupling superstructures as what the mainframes were doing in the late 1960s. The premise of this transition was a book called The Coming Computer Industry Shakedown by Stephen McClellan in 1984, quoting, "As software gains ascendancy, the keyword will no longer be customization, specialization, and market niche. The new word will be integration. System integration will be the most sophisticated and difficult task computer companies will have to undertake." That quote, being 40 years old, gives us the privilege of seeing what happens. Essentially, 4 strategies were developed to tackle this problem. The first is to impose on a vertical by claiming the standard, but in practice, only one player can do that. So OS2 died. Apple took a different route by being its own vertical, while Linux had to push up the wheel out of the carpet and needed enough people to do it. Luckily, timing was on their side. When the internet was mostly accessed at universities, September annually brought in a flood of new people that had to be coached. As residential internet grew, the old guard termed 1993 as the Eternal September, the beginning of the mainstreaming of internet access. For this to happen, cheap ISPs and web servers needed to exist quickly to support users, and Linux was there to provide. It's important to know that Linux was prima facie hobbyist and personal use oriented at this time, even though Linux Journal has articles in 1994 about it as a web server and running ISPs. Contemporary texts such as Linux Getting Started, Unleashing a Workstation PC, or Plug and Play Linux were in the lower 2 steps of our staircase, hobbyist and personal. The early Slackware MCC and SLS distros from the time also didn't include web servers or tools to run a business. The first people in the new use cases didn't get there with clean off-the-shelf solutions. They played the scout role, clearing the road for the army to roll in, which is why the web server book in 1995 now includes Linux. Another benefactor of the Eternal September is attributed to Linus's law. Given enough eyeballs, all books are shallow. Let's look at various eyeballs. In the first term slide, claiming that Linux was mostly built by college students, here's some evidence. After first releasing in October, Linus got some help from a local friend, but by November he had contributions from Hong Kong. I can say Linux got some help by a local got some local help. But it had contributions. Yeah, talk about it as the actual project. Linux got some local help, but by November it had contributions from Hong Kong, MIT, and the University of Utah. In December, I don't want to use contributions. Help came from Calgary and Berkeley, and then Colorado and Maryland students came in January. So far, everyone is under 25, and there became an increasingly pressing need for a solution like Linux to solve new problems. These needs more or less persist to this day. Apple is vertical, Microsoft is entitled, and Linux continues to climb stairs that have yet to be drawn. Here's a quote from Torvalds. "I think the timing was good. Even just a year earlier, I don't think it could have been done. And a year later, somebody else would have done something similar. These two bottom charts, so Linux now dominates supercomputer and web space. How's everyone doing? Are you still awake? Yes, that's typed on the sheet, as is this. This is long, so let's have some fun. If there was a storefront named Open Source, what would be displayed on its windows? In fact, let's do some interactive theater with something that looks like the Kyrgyzstan flag. We're a group of people in 1985 trying to bring free software to the masses. Our marketing director just told us about the marketing mix with the 4 Ps: product, price, place, and promotion. In order to have a figurehead for the free software movement, we need to find a piece of free software that qualifies these conditions. It should be easy to try, acquire, and understand. It should also have a low price of time, money, and expertise. I appreciate the suggestions so far. These are all excellent examples of free software. I especially like the elevator pitch for Emacs org mode. Before we settle on a project, I'm wondering if we've left anything out. This is some interactive theater with something that looks like the Kyrgyzstan flag. That's funny. Any suggestions from the audience? Oh, yes, you, sir, who have known for over a decade. Oh, that's a great idea. Maybe Linux can be the window dressing of the free software movement. Or how about this? I have a better idea. Let's make an alt copyright pipeline. We have low effort things for curious PC users to try. Then we gently tell them the beliefs of our community, encourages them to up their commitments. They'll become more familiar with projects, which take effort and expertise, get more involved, and become advocate. Over time, some of them will report bugs, help determine needs, and implement desires to move our aspirational project forward and make it more tangible. In order to do this, we must be a welcoming community, but by necessity, but also because we brought in the right people. We can call it the GPL's temple. The GPL's temple. Yeah, that's what I thought. That's what I came up with. We call it the the Gippels Temple. The Gippels Temple. The Gippels Temple. That's what should be there. A welcoming community. That's funny, especially if I lay it out. That's funny. That's good. All right. I gotta go, but that works so well. So up here, let's just do it. The Gippels Temple. It's a reference to Jim Jones, in case you don't know. Let's just end it right here. I'll do the rest of it later. Yeah, I'm truncating early because I got to be somewhere at 7:30, and that's in 7 minutes. All right, bye-bye. Sorry.